I've never written journals. I've never done diaries or anything like that, so I don't have a record of that sort of stuff with myself. I mean, it must be marvellous to have a whole lot of diaries to refer to. When I wrote my memoir, I didn't have a diary to refer to. I had to just dredge it all up in my mind from my own experiences and from my memories. But there's this little book called A Path Through Trees by people at Shop 14. Shop 14 was, I hark back to these drop-in centres, day program places. This was a place run by my fellowship in Melbourne, in the suburbs near Hoppers Crossing and places like that in Melbourne. So that's, what's that? South west of Melbourne. And Shop 14. And they ran a writing program for people, and people did the writing program, and they put together a book called A Path Through Trees. And some of them reflected on what writing had meant for them and coming to the shop. And someone wrote for them, "Writing for me is a way of releasing my previously buried feelings. Shop 14 Writers Group has given me so much inspiration and motivation that I now write because I enjoy it, not just out of depression." So this person found that writing, not just in a depressed state but in other states, was really productive for them, that writing for them was a way of experiencing a really great thing. What else did someone say? Oh yeah, someone wrote, "Since I've been going to Shop 14, I feel I feel a bit relieved. They're so wonderful and give me such understanding as I can get. I think we all know what's wrong with ourselves and need to talk about it and work it out to solve any trauma we've all been through. So writing a few poems is relaxing and very comforting." So, I mean, all the way through this book there are testaments to writing. Writing for me is a way to interrogate reality into my life. It is a means of reconciling perceptions with assumptions. For me, if I can make sense of my past, I will have succeeded. So that's writing is storytelling, and as he's speaking to an audience, it's all about storytelling. And storytelling, I mean, I just think it's an ancient art. You know, the great poems, the great Homer poems, the Odyssey and the Iliad, all began as oral traditions. You know, people keep retelling these great poems to each other down the ages, and Homer finally wrote it down. It was storytelling. And storytelling is a great thing that we as a society have always had at our disposal and have always pursued. So all the great literature is storytelling. All the great poems are storytelling. And I just think that we have to encourage storytelling wherever we can, because it not only helps us to understand ourselves, but it helps us to connect with another person in a way that's really, really important. And I just think that storytelling, I think, is the essence of who we are. And for those of us with mental illness, I think it's pivotal that we gather our narrative and have the courage to express it to other people. Because we all give ourselves a narrative to understand our lives. I've given myself a narrative, and that's one of mental illness and my poetry and my life. And we sort of construct a narrative around our lives, how we understand what we've done in our life, how we live it. And once we understand our narrative, we can give it body and we can give it shape, and we can tell it in ways that are different and in ways that are productive. And there's more than one way to tell a story. You know, we can tell it in comedy, we can tell it in poetry, we can tell it in just straight prose narrative, we can sing it, we can sing songs about our narrative, we can make a song out of it. I mean, there's many ways to tell our narrative. I'd love to be a stand-up comic, but I haven't got the guts to do it. But people say I should try stand-up comedy, and I think, God, who want to do that? I mean, God, what if you died on stage? Oh, God. That'd be so awful. I mean, people die on stage all the time, don't they? Oh, God. Anyway.
So you're making us laugh now. I reckon if you did a stand-up routine with that, you'd have people laughing.
I don't know. It's tantalising to try, but I'd never give it a go because I just haven't got the confidence.
You've already got the good stage name.
What?
Sandy Jeffs. I think that's a great name.
Is it? No, it's a horrible name.
It's a great name for a comedian.
Do you reckon? You try getting a plane ticket with a name like Jeffs at the end, though. I've got to go Juliet Echo Foxtrot Sienna to spell my name because I can never get the two F's and the S at the end. It's impossible. Oh, honestly, it's impossible. So is anybody here? Look, tell me about your stories here. where are you all workers, consumers? Who are we all? Who are we all in this room? Who wants to have a go? Yeah.
I could just say I'm a worker, and one of the most things that really hit me when I first started working in this field, I was a registered nurse, and then I'd been on the farm and came back and started working in this field. There's a lady here today just in another session, and she wrote a story about exactly her words of the first experience of schizophrenia and how she was driving along and she heard the voices, and it was beautifully written, and she's made this little book. Could never get it published, but just printed it out and handed it around services. And for me, it was just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I didn't realise the reality. You know, you can read about things, but and listening to you today, I was in tears because it was just so. I don't know. It's just such a horrible reality. Isn't it?
Not the best reality.
No. And seeing it from kind of the side that I've been on, and yeah, understanding, but you never understand what it's like.
No, and I think the beauty of having someone either write or actually someone telling you. Actually, I think even speaking and telling is more, sometimes more engaging than just reading a written word. When you see someone talking to you, you see their craggy face, you see their tears, you see their laughter, you see their horrible teeth, or you see their, the lines on their face, or when you see the face actually before you're moving, with all the emotions that the face carries with it, it just makes it so much more poignant for you as a listener. Because it's the real tears, the real laughter, the real emotions that you see. And you can't get that sometimes just on a written page unless the writer's really skilled and can convey it quite well. But you can't beat a real person. You know, it's better having a robot speaking to you or a textbook speaking to you. You know, I mean, I find textbooks are fascinating. I mean, they are not storytelling. Textbooks are not storytelling. They are just information. And I think a lot of textbooks could actually do better to have some lived experience through them so that it makes the text a bit more comprehensible and real. Yeah. Any other testimonies here for stories?
I'm Annie, and I work in mental health. I also have a lived experience of mental illness and family generational mental illness.
So your family's riven with it, is it? A little bit of a genetic inheritance disposition or something? Yeah.
I tell my story in poetry, as you do, and I don't share it very much, but it's just wonderful to write it. But I love stories. I was a teacher before I became a social worker, and I've always loved stories, and I love sharing stories, and I share people's stories with other people. And I think that brings a real richness, not only to all of our lives, but I think it adds that real element for some people. I remember one woman telling me she felt that she was not alone anymore because she wasn't the only one who had experienced this or lived like this.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's about not being alone, feeling you're not alone. Yeah. So I think too many people with mental illness, particularly psychotic illnesses, or even all mental illnesses, there's an element of feeling abandoned and alone, and that you cannot reach beyond yourself to connect with someone beyond you. And that's a real terrible thing about mental illness. Sometimes you are isolated by it. You do become unreaching and unreachable. And when that happens, it's like you're in a bell jar, and there's a glass cage between you and the rest of the world, and you're trying to get out of it to communicate. And people can see you, but they can't communicate with you, and you can't communicate with them. It's the most awful, frustrating feeling, and it's the most disempowering feeling because you feel as though you're a lost soul in this world where no one understands you, and you don't understand it. And so to feel alone is the loneliest thing in the world, really. It's the most awful thing. And to think that no one understands you or knows where you're coming from, and to feel as though you'll never connect with other people again is quite terrifying, I have to say. And too many people with psychotic illnesses have their negative symptoms and have an isolation imposed on them by their illness sometimes, and it's just awful. And that's why I suppose telling our stories is a way of connecting with other people, I think, and that's really a nice thing to do. Anybody else with a connecting story yeah?
When I was pregnant with my first kid, it was quite traumatic, and so I was bedridden for months and months and months. And I dabbled in creative writing a lot growing up, but when you're in your bed and the only things you see are the same walls and the same sheets and the same pictures, it it was getting me quite depressed and very sick, not just physically but mentally. So I actually, rather than telling my story as my story, I started writing my first novel. So while I couldn't escape my reality, I could escape into my own fantasy,
Yes.
Rachel Land.
Did you finish it?
I did. I've written a few books since then.
Oh wow!
So,
Have they been published?
no, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so
Oh, okay.
you know, I think it's on like draft 8.
Oh wow! And that's a good sign. It's a good sign you're doing drafts.
But it was good because, you know, I started off writing, you know, fantasy with, you know, Spartacus meets Lord of the Rings. Anybody who pissed me off, you could create a character and have them killed.
Oh, I love it. That's such power.
So in my regard, I guess it was my story, but in an illusion of my real reality, I guess.
But it actually helped you to get through that time, though, didn't it?
And I find it did.
Yeah.
It did. I actually enjoyed being awake and, you know, rather than just wanting to die.
Yeah. Was your baby all right?
Baby was fine. I suffered. So.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But at least you had writing. I mean, that's fantastic.
But it helped. The best thing, my husband even went out and bought me the first iPad. You know?
That's good.
And
Yeah.
it did. It really, really did help, and it's just something I've kept going now as a way of self-expression or reflection and just fun. You know, to be able to share ideas. If any police went through my browser history on how to murder people and things.
But it also shows how the imagination is such a pivotal thing that we have at our disposal, that we can bring from our imagination stories like you're telling, and I can write my poems, and even telling stories is an imaginative exercise, because you're bringing to bear language and ideas and concepts all into the one little narrative that you're giving. But you know, I think the imagination has to be celebrated, because, and I always maintain that our delusions, when we have delusions, my God, are they the most imaginative, wondrous things you can create? If you said to someone, I'm going to make a delusion, this is what it's going to be, you couldn't just make it up, because what we manufacture in psychosis in our delusional worlds, oh my God, I'm in awe of my mad comrades and the delusions they have. I just think they're the most bizarre things, but the most wondrously creative things. You know, and I sort of always laugh at my mad comrades when they tell them to me. One of my mad comrades thought he was Mishka, the Russian the Russian mascot for the Russian Olympics. He thought he was Mishka. I thought, how funny is that? And I just thought it was hilarious. And someone else, and just recently someone told me one that was so funny, and I can't think what it was now. Oh, I know. I'm doing interviews. I'm actually interviewing people to do a little history of Larundel Psychiatric Hospital. So I've done about 75 interviews of past patients, staff, doctors, workers, nurses, you name it. And hopefully with another author, we'll get it done. But this guy, a friend of mine, he thought he was actually in hospital with Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, who else? Oh, and some famous people at the time. Who else was there?
Jesus.
No, was it? No, I've been in hospital with 3 Jesus at one time. That was interesting. That was Larundel, 1991. All 3 guys all thought they were Jesus, all at the same, in A ward, Larundel. My God, that was so funny. And they were vying to be the one Jesus. It was hilarious. But Bruce was there with Bob Dylan, Allen Ginsberg, the poet, Allen Ginsberg, Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen. They thought these people in the ward were these people. And he said he was just convinced that they were, and he was trying to have this conversation with them as Allen Ginsberg and as Bob Dylan and as Leonard Cohen, and he said it was the most bizarre thing, but he really believed it. I mean, how extraordinary is that? Yeah, and just other things people have thought. That one woman thought that she was being chased by her liver around the room. I mean, you can't manufacture this out of just. I mean, it's so creative. And it has an element of nightmare and dream involved in it, and it has that sort of nebulousness of a dream, which is not quite true, but it is true, and it's just bizarre. But what I'm trying to say though is our imaginations are a gift that we've been given, and I think writing and storytelling are the gift that the imagination gives us as well. I just think it's fantastic, and I think all power to the imagination. And for me, when I feel as though I can't create or be creative, I feel spiritually and emotionally quite dead. I hate it when I don't feel creative. Anybody else with a story about telling stories or anything? No? Yes? Hello?
My experience is a little bit like yours. I've always written a lot of short stories, and I've written a couple of novels. And it's always that notion of sometimes feeling like if you were to write your own story down, it would be confronting because it makes it real, do you know what I mean? But how interesting it is that when you do write fiction, how much of your own story comes out in it, comes out in your characters and in the storylines, and you sort of read back over it and you know the memories that led to that storyline in the story, do you know what I mean? And the humour, and it is really interesting how like you don't have to tell your story directly, but really quite indirectly, and that itself is enough too. Yeah.
And when you reread the words, how do you feel? When you look at when you read the novel, when you read the novel again that you've written, how do you feel when you read it?
A bit like you do that perfectionist actually. I think, oh my gosh, that's crap.
It's confronting, isn't
I need
it?
to reword that.
Yeah, you need to rewrite it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like certainly, I think it's more about the characters and the traits that are in the different characters and the choices that they make. So,
And I think the editing part's really important in writing too. You've got to edit. I mean, no first draft ever works. If it does, it's a miracle. But I remember, I'm always wary of people who rock up to poetry readings and they go, oh, I just wrote this poem on the tram on the way here. And then they read the poem. And it's usually so it's just usually so bad because it hasn't been edited or, worked on or honed. Because it's a craft. Writing and writing is a craft. And you have to really go through the process of editing. I think with my memoir, Flying with Paper Wings, I think went through about 8 drafts, I think, in the end. And even writing that was interesting. It's a memoir, it's my story. But I do think that memoirs are works of fiction when I think about it. I sort of think, I read it and think, this can't be true. this surely isn't right. But that was interesting because I had to go. I had an editor working with me on it, and she asked me to write it. It wasn't my idea to write my memoir. It was not my idea. She said, "Please have a go at it." And she used to be an editor for Ellen Unwin and Penguin, so I said, "I'll give it a go." And she worked with me all the way through, and she actually turned my sow's ear into a little bit of a silk purse, I have to say, because my prose isn't that flash. I don't think so. But I had to work, and I had to work hard, and that was and writing poetry and prose is different. Writing a memoir is different to writing poetry. My poetry tends to be much more on inspiration, whereas with my memoir, I had to actually sit down, bloody write it nearly every day. I actually do a sustained writing of it. Oh God, it was hard. It was so not my way at all. Anyway, I did it. Any other stories in the room? Yep.
Yeah. So I was bedridden for 5 years.
Oh God.
So that was a long time.
Yeah.
And I was told basically just don't bother doing anything. You had it. So somebody actually reached out to me and made an offer to me to actually work. And it got me into recovery mode. And so I've started writing down all my story. So just hearing how other people have written books or have used that time creatively to put things together. And so writing my story, because it's so convoluted, I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I want to make it about recovery, about the journey, so that I can share that with other people.
Yep.
And there is humour involved, because I don't think that having mental illness, a lot of people can survive without that.
Oh, tell me black humour in particular. I think we are practitioners of black humour. I think specialise in it, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, you have to, otherwise you wouldn't survive.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sitting in the Arundel and A ward in 1991. And God, the black humour in that locked ward was extraordinary. Like it's just, it was quite a privilege to actually be around it. But yeah, so your recovery journey is all in your work, in your writing.
Yeah. So just starting out now, writing it now. So from 2007 to 2012, I didn't exist. It was horrible. And that put a lot of pressure on my family, on my partner. We just had brand new twins.
Oh God.
They've got autism, so we were just.
Oh dear.
We've got a whole lot of fun going on at our house.
Yeah, just a few issues to deal with.
Yeah, generational mental illness. So
God.
it's just a really big journey, but being able to just get that out, and it's really, for me, it's sort of part of my recovery is to actually get that out onto the screen.
Yeah.
And whether it ever gets published or not is neither here nor there for me, because I think it's more about getting that journey out of here and letting it go.
And as you write, you discover things about yourself you didn't know, and you find yourself making a lot of connections you didn't realise. And the whole process is really one of discovery, because suddenly you're moulding all your experiences into words. And you've got to use, because words are what we have, that's how you do it. And suddenly the words take on an importance that they wouldn't have had before, because each word is crucial when you write it down. Because there's a structure, there's a sentence, there's a paragraph. The lights really go out of it.
Moving enough, I imagine.
Wrestling style.
So what's going on? Is there a conspiracy to do something? Am I having
Is there a switch?
not a paranoid thought or anything?
It might be motion sensor.
Somebody needs to dance.
Dance around. Hey, what a hoot!
While everybody's distracted, I've just come to ask permission just to take a couple of photos of just the group.
Oh,
That's
that, am I mine?
Is
No, I'm
that
mine.
okay with people?
No, that's fine. No one seems to
I'll just
object.
get a couple and I'll
Okay.
leave you alone.
No worries. Yeah, that's very concerning. A lot's going on. Now I'm
If you
worried.
flick the switches, there's a bank of switches there.
Oh,
Would it
that's-
help to flick them
could
off
have
and on
been-
again?
Could have been my power.
Your power.
My power. Yeah. Anyway, but that's lovely to hear, Jason, because I think the fact that you're
Turn them on.
the fact that you're writing is fantastic. I think you'll discover things that you wouldn't have known about before when you write, and that's the beauty of what you discover each time you go to the screen and start tapping away. It's just wonderful, and it's just the most empowering thing you can do, I reckon. And also to see it there in black and white on the page or on the screen is different to having it in your head. It's a whole different, because it's now out there, separate from you. But you've created it, but it's separate from you, and it's a whole new different ball game. Because when it's in your head, it's a very different thing. But actually channeling it out is interesting. It's a wonderful process, and I recommend it to anyone to write, and poetry in particular. I have great faith in poetry. I really do. I just think it's a way of saying the unsayable and speaking the unspeakable. And poetry, you use language in a different way. Really different way, and it's about being the metaphor, the image, the rhythm. You don't have to rhyme or anything, but it's just a different way of speaking, a different way of looking at literature and getting your thoughts down. So I have great faith in poetry as a vehicle for expressing a lot of things that you don't normally express. Yeah, I was going to read a poem by Maya Angelou. Did anyone know Maya Angelou? She's an American poet. She's dead now. Sorry, she's dead now, but she is. She died in the last couple of years. She actually read a poem at, it was either Clinton's inauguration, it might have been one of Clinton's inaugurations. So they had now, at the presidential inaugurations, they have a poet now who reads a poem. And Robert Frost was the first poet to ever read a poem at an inauguration, and it was JFK's, I think, his inauguration. And Maya Angelou, who's a black American, she read one at Clinton's, and she's written this poem. It's called Still I Rise, and it's sort of an anthem, an anthemic poem, and I really love it because it says a lot about, well, blacks in America, but also her as a poet. It's called Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You tread me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like the moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Do you take it awful hard? Because I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise? But I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs. Out of the huts of history's shame I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. In a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. I love that poem. It's such an anthem for Black America. But it's storytelling in a poetic form, but it's also it's a call to arms. A call to arms by all her comrades to rise up and rise, as Black America tries to do every now and then, and sort of gets thwarted by the Republican Party, really. The Looney Tune Republican Party. Can I just say they are a bit of a Looney Tune, aren't they? Can you see Donald Trump doing I'm trying to imagine Donald Trump doing diplomacy with Putin, North Korea and China. I'm just trying to get my head around it a bit, the diplomacy, I can't quite see it personally. And then also he's got his button on the nuclear, the hand on the nuclear button. Oh my God, that place is so sick. I think they're very unwell in America. They have got a deep malaise
I think they're making a special one just for Donald Trump that actually isn't connected to anything.
Oh God, I hope so. I really hope so.
So you can sit there all day going like that.
Yeah, why isn't it working? Why has Russia been blown up? That's right. Oh God. Anyway.
It's a screen. Explosion on it.
Anyways. So today you've had this mental health day. You've got another day tomorrow, and I can't be here tomorrow. I'm going. It's so funny. When I leave here, I'm just going into a car immediately and being ferried to the airport immediately. So like rock stars. It's so funny. I've never done this before like this. I've never had to get in the car and go immediately to the airport to get the plane. And I have to say the plane's only got propellers. I got in the plane yesterday and I thought, shit, this plane's only got propellers. I really was worried because I think I'd like a bit of a jet engine happening. I feel like I'm in a Spitfire in 1942. It's just so awful. Anyway, so what? Any observations on storytelling anyone has? Any other observations or comments? Yeah.
I just want to share that I've met Jason a few times through training, and he shared his story with me, which enabled me to help my partner who suffers from depression and anxiety.
Right.
So through him sharing his story, that helped me help someone I love.
Yeah, so it's good, that connectedness and sharing wisdom. Jason sharing his wisdom with you. That's really good. It's nice to know. And it is about the connecting, and ultimately about connecting. That's what you want the whole thing to end up with, a big connection. That's why good novels work and good poems work, because you feel, when you read them, you feel as though you're really with the author, and there's some journey you're having with them, and you're in the story with them, or in the poem with them. That's really important. So, anything else?
I just reckon if there was more poetry read out, it would be very different. Life would be very different. Because poetry is great in a book, it is. But when it's read out like that, it's incredibly powerful.
That's why poetry readings are good. I mean, I go to I run one in Christmas Hills where I live, but I go to the occasional ones. Although I have to say, we are our own worst enemy. I think poets in particular who do performances or go to open mics, the curse of the open mic is the poet who has 3 minutes to read a poem and go for about 15 minutes. And I think that's the curse of the open mic. And I think poets are their own worst enemy because we are a mixture of complete hubris and complete insecurity. And that mixture of hubris and insecurity creates a monster. So when they get up at the open mic, suddenly they grow behind the microphone and they take off. It's like, you don't get the hook to sort of hook them off. So they're not the featured reader off, they're just doing an open mic. So we are naughty, we are very naughty, but to actually hear poetry read out, I think is a lovely gift. And when people do it well, it's actually lovely. Although sometimes you go to readings, people read their poetry, they're fantastic. You buy their book, it doesn't translate to the page. So some poems are read well, translate to the page, so the whole package is fantastic. Some poems are just for performance only, and some poems are just to be read. So I think poetry has many dimensions to it, and it falls into various categories, I think, which is interesting. But there's now the slam poetry movement, which is very big, and I don't do slam poetry. I don't like competitive poetry. Competitive poetry. I tend to be more I'm a cardboard and paper girl still, so I tend to read books, and I like reading poetry. And I'm not good at listening sometimes. I'm not a good listener, so I like to read it. But I think poetry is, for me, it's been my lifeline, and I think that's what it's done for me. And as I said in my talk, when I used to in my chronic years when I was just diagnosed, writing poems and put them in a drawer, no one saw them. But when I held the poem in my hand that I'd written, it really was for me evidence that I was still alive. That poem and that bit of paper, I held it, I would look at it, I wrote that. It was evidence that I was still alive, and that was so necessary at the time because I had nothing else in my life at the time to give me evidence that I was alive. It was hard work, but the poems were a lifeline. And it was Susan Hawthorne at Spinifex Press who really changed my life by publishing my first book. If I didn't know Susan, I wouldn't have had any poems published, and so she changed my life. And I acknowledge her. She really she took a chance and she changed my life. But she allowed me to tell my story. So storytelling.
I think for the most part, I feel like you've got to earn the right to hear someone's story. Like,
What do you mean?
Like a relationship, like and a non-judging sort of. Like, for me, I couldn't tell my story to someone that I didn't really have that relationship with. So.
Well, get out in front of an audience who doesn't know you from a bar of soap is a very challenging thing. And that's when we first went out in the 80s telling our stories. We told the people who had no idea who we were. As far as I'm concerned, we're just mad people who had these mad stories to tell. So telling a story to strangers, to an audience, standing in front of an audience of 100 people or 500 people, it's a very weird thing to do.
I might be able to do it.
Well, it's a funny thing to do. You sort of wonder. First of all, I wonder who is that woman standing on stage that I don't recognise, because I don't recognise who I am on stage, honestly. Who is that woman? And secondly, it's a why does one do it? Is it ego that makes you do it? Is it simply wanting to communicate that makes you do it? Why do we tell our stories? And for some people, there is a bit. I mean, there's a bit of ego in all that we do. I have to confess, I have a bit of ego in what I do, otherwise I wouldn't do it. But I hope it's more than just ego. I hope it's more about the connectiveness and the authenticity of the story. But it is challenging to do that. But you learn how to do it too. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you are doing it. Not that you are terrified every time you get up to speak. But the more you do it, you'll be surprised how comfortable you become doing it, because only you can tell your story. And no one else can even presume to tell your story for you. Only you can tell it. And only you can tell it in your way. And that's the power of it, I think, which is lovely. It's a lovely thing we have in our hands, yes.
I think a motivating factor for humans to tell their story is actually to give support to people around them. So it's probably not an egotistical situation for many people, but more to share your experience in the hope that it can make someone else's experience a little bit easier, or their recovery a little bit easier.
Yeah, about sharing your wisdom, sharing with other people, and if you can help someone along the way, that's a real bonus, Or if you can help someone understand mental illness, the smaller iota of it, what it means to hear voices, or what it means to have a delusion. If you can help someone understand those little things, in even the slightest way, then you've done your job. Because we know that mental illness is a most intractable thing and a most mysterious thing for the people who don't experience it. It's a complete mystery. How do you make that mystery not so mysterious for people, And I suppose what I try and do mainly is I often talk about my story, my voices, my hallucinations, and what it means to have these and what it feels like. I actually go into quite detail with my audiences about, when I tell my story in that sense, about what it's like to have these experiences, because they're so mysterious to people. It's a real mystery. If you've never heard a voice in your head, you can't imagine what it's like. It's a mystery. It's a total mystery. Still a mystery to me, but yeah. Yep. Oh, I was going to say something else.
Yes, I was just thinking that too. I hear, when I hear voices, I hear them out loud.
Yeah.
And I can't understand the mechanism.
No.
It's out there.
Yeah, why are they out there when they're in your head?
Yes, that's right.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It is. I cannot imagine why they sound external and like other people in a room talking to you. It's a real mystery.
Yes.
One woman I spoke to said she says it's as real as this.
Yeah. Yeah, I say it's as real as you speaking to me or me speaking to you. Yeah. But it is. It's how can it happen? This is the bizarre wondrousness of the mind and how complex the mind is, and what a powerful tool it is sitting in our skull, and how this thing that we can't trust because it takes us to places we don't want to go. It's a thing which is so mysterious. It's the most extraordinary organ that we have, and there's an idea that because it's the mind, is it a sacred organ, unlike a kidney or a heart? Because there's this idea that you shouldn't medicate the brain or the mind, you shouldn't touch it because it's a sacred organ. Because in that part of our body is located our soul and our aspirations and dreams, and this other part of us which is the essence of who we are. And is it a sacred organ? Should we be touching it, medicating it and stuff? Like in the same way that we medicate a heart or a liver or a kidney, But in a sense, it's just another organ too. It is just like a heart or a kidney or a liver.
I call it a chemical factory.
The chemical factory, yeah. It's a mind factory too. It's a thought factory. Yeah. It's a
They're all chemically created.
Yeah. And where does a thought come from? Where do our thoughts come from? It's extraordinary. And when you see it just sitting on a brain sitting on a bench, you think, how can that thing manufacture the most wondrous music and poetry and art, and how can it manufacture all these things?
It's like it's a universe in your head.
It is, it's a universe in our head. And it's wondrous.
I like what you said. Sorry, I just like what you said about medicate the brain and talk to the mind.
Yes.
When you were talking before, and I really love that because I thought that relates to some of the work we do.
Yeah.
We're talking to someone's mind, and then that. It's a freeing process.
Well, I when I talk to psychiatrists, I always tell them that because medicating the brain is one thing, but you've got to talk to the mind. And they've forgotten to talk to the mind because they're so busy bloody medicating the brain. But maybe you need to medicate the brain so you can talk to the mind. Who knows? But in the end, you're talking to a mind. And psychiatry's forgotten about that. It's too busy trying to nuke the voices with drugs and, nuke your brain with drugs. So I think it's... And I actually made that up. That's mine. You can medicate the brain and talk to the mind. Oh, I claim that one. Sorry, I claim it. I have to finish in a minute. I've got to go.
How do we get access to your work, your books? I know you've run out of your poetry today.
Yeah, I've got some memoirs left. I've run out of poetry books.
And if people can contact Partners in Recovery to get contact, is
yeah,
that the best way? Are you okay with that?
And I can see if people want to buy books, I can send books to you because it's easier for me to send them to you. And whatever.
Yeah, so people are able to contact Partners in Recovery and the organisers, and they can send through.
Yeah.
Sandy, can I just share something finally about stories? Recently working with, I've met a person at an initial referral, and I was kind of stumped that it became, I don't know, I wasn't prepared for what was suggested to me by this person. They actually wanted me to share some of my issues with them before they would share theirs with me. And at first I was like, went into the worker thing, no boundaries, can't be sharing personal details, and it all fell apart because of that. The person didn't trust me because I wouldn't come to that. And we walked away, but after thinking about it for a while, I was thinking it kind of made sense in that fact that why would he share sensitive detail with me if I wouldn't transfer back the other way to a degree? And so it was an interesting kind of interaction that got me really thinking about that.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because clinicians expect us to unload all our story all our soap opera onto them, and then and they expose nothing of themselves. So it's a tricky one. That one.
A lot of us work within the concept of appropriate sharing.
Yeah, appropriate sharing.
Parts of our stories.
Yeah.
We're willing to share, and obviously, parts that are private.
Yeah.
But I think it needs to be a relationship and a dialogue. And I really go into a session where I wouldn't say anything to
you. I just got stuck because I'd never experienced that.
Because the wisdom is about your boundaries.
Yeah.
But my psychologist and I share a lot of stuff. She's been to my book launches. She came to Brisbane to a show based on my poetry. She's really engaged with me in a way, and she's Jewish, so we often share the notion that if we're back in Nazi Germany, I'd be in Auschwitz with her probably because I'm mad and a lesbian, so I'm in deep trouble, and she's Jewish, so we would be in Auschwitz together. We often say to each other, which is rather interesting. But she's a sharer, a bit of a sharer, and I like that. And what I like about her is she gets things wrong. She stuffs up. She's human. Doesn't pretend to be God or goddess. And I just like it because we have this. I just like it. Whereas my psychologist is different. She is a boundary person in a way, and it's a very different relationship, but it's effective but different. And I sort of think, oh,
well, I
she's
still
very
think
focused.
you can share and have cast iron boundaries.
Yeah.
And your boundaries are the sense of trust that you have to have them, or the person can't trust you. If you have
That's
flexible
right.
boundaries, you won't have trust with that
Yeah.
person. So you need to be very secure with yourself to be with them and help them feel secure.
And also, I like to remind my psychiatrist that she is very privileged that I am there telling her my story. She's in the most privileged position. I am actually telling her my story. And
I tell my clients that they've employed me.
Yeah, well,
I'm working for you.
Yeah. Well, my friend Lynn thought that her psychologist was like a detective. A detective paid to unleash stuff in her mind, or to find out stuff in her mind that she needs to understand. So it was a paid detective, private detective. I like that one too. I have to go, do I?
Yeah, you've got 1 minute.
I'm sorry, there was a bit of a rambly old workshop, wasn't it? I didn't quite know what to do. I didn't know what to do, so I'm sorry.
Everything beautifully.
Can we all thank Sandy for sharing this?